Inside Attica, America's bloodiest prison riot. The sparks of blood. The September morning began like any other in upstate New York, but inside Attica Correctional Facility, the air was different. Charged, suffocating, alive with something unseen. Guards marched the tiers with forced authority, boots echoing against the steel walkways, their eyes darting at the restless bodies behind bars. The inmates had been on edge for weeks, whispers running like wildfire through cell blocks C and D. Tension had been simmering, too many beatings in the shadows, too many men stripped of dignity and left broken and solitary, too many meals served cold and laced with contempt. Everyone knew something was about to explode, but nobody knew when or how or who would light the match. At 10 a.m. the silence broke. A guard shoved an inmate harder than necessary during morning lineup. The inmate stumbled, his pride more bruised than his body. Shouts erupted. Someone hurled a food tray. A fist followed, then another. Within minutes, cell block D transformed into a battlefield. Inmates overpowered officers, dragging them down, keys ripped from belts, weapons improvised from pipes, shanks and fire extinguishers. By noon, nearly half the prison was in chaos. Sirens wailed, but the guards were outnumbered. The convicts had seized hostages, 42 correctional officers and civilian staff. They barricaded doors, chained gates, and climbed onto tiers with a newfound sense of power. For the first time in Attica's history, the prisoners controlled the prison. Outside the walls, news spread like wildfire. Cameras rolled, helicopters circled, and state officials scrambled. This wasn't just another prison scuffle. It was the biggest uprising America had ever seen, and the world was watching. Inside the yard, leaders emerged. Some men sought justice, demanding better food, medical care, and the right to basic human dignity. Others were driven by rage and revenge, determined to make their captors bleed for every humiliation endured. Among them was Leonard "Big Smoke" Harris, a lifer with a reputation for organizing men as easily as others breathed. He stood tall in the yard, his voice cutting through the noise. "We ain't just fighting for today. We're fighting for every man locked behind these walls." The hostages sat in a tight circle, blindfolded and trembling. Some prisoners brought them water. Others taunted them with knives. Fear was everywhere, heavy in the air. Negotiators arrived at the gates, state troopers armed to the teeth waiting just beyond. Politicians debated whether to talk or to strike. As night fell, the yard was lit with floodlights and fury. Inmates built makeshift barricades from mattresses, steel bars, and overturned tables. Chants of "power to the people" echoed against the high walls, while terrified hostages prayed silently in the dark. But behind the chants and anger, something else was brewing. The rumor that not all the prisoners wanted peace. That a faction, small but ruthless, planned to silence the hostages permanently to force the state's hand. By dawn, the rumor had grown into a terrifying possibility. And then, in the far corner of the yard, a sound froze everyone in place. A door, one that had been locked for years, swung open with a screech of rusted hinges. Guards had always said nothing was behind it but storage. But when the inmates pulled it wide and stepped into the blackness, what they found changed everything. Shadows behind the door. The hidden door groaned as it opened, spilling dust into the already tense air. The inmates clustered around, flashlights trembling in their hands. Inside was no simple storage room. It was a forgotten passage, a corridor of cracked concrete walls leading into the bowels of Attica. Some swore the guards had sealed it off decades earlier, hiding something they didn't want seen. Others whispered about old escape tunnels, or chambers where prisoners were taken and never returned. The men stepped cautiously, the beam of a flashlight bouncing against rusted chains hanging from the ceiling, dried stains on the walls that looked far too much like blood. The discovery divided the uprising. Big Smoke saw an opportunity, a bargaining chip. "We show the world what's been buried under Attica," he declared, "and they'll have no choice but to listen." But another man, Tyrone "Red Dog" Miles, wasn't interested in bargaining. His eyes gleamed as he traced the stains with his fingers. "This ain't for negotiating," he muttered. "This is for revenge." News of the passage spread like fire across the yard. Men crowded to see the hidden space, their imaginations feeding the chaos. The hostages, huddled together, overheard enough to realize something darker was unraveling. One correction officer, trembling, whispered to another, "If they decide to use us in there, no one will ever find us." Meanwhile, the state watched from the outside, pressure mounting. Governor Rockefeller, under national scrutiny, refused to step foot at Attica. Negotiators sent into the prison yard tried to cool tempers, reading lists of demands written by the prisoners. decent food, medical treatment, religious freedom, an end to brutal beatings. The men wanted to be treated like human beings, not animals. Cameras caught every word, broadcasting the demands across America. But the hidden corridor shifted everything. Rumors leaked to the media, whispers of secret torture rooms, evidence of decades of abuse sealed within the prison walls. Families of inmates gathered outside the gates, chanting for truth. Guards' unions demanded a military strike. Politicians argued live on television. Attica was no longer just a prison riot. It had become a stage where America's darkest secrets were being dragged into the light. Inside, the split between Big Smoke and Red Dog deepened. Big Smoke wanted the discovery used as proof, to force concessions. Red Dog saw it as the perfect place to send a message. He rallied the angriest men, promising blood. "They've tortured us in these walls," he shouted. "Now it's our turn." As night fell again, a storm rolled over upstate New York, thunder shaking the walls. Lightning flashed through the yard, illuminating hundreds of men pressed together, faces carved with fear and fury. In the chaos, one hostage went missing. His blindfold lay in the mud, soaked by rain. The next morning, the prison yard erupted with shouts. A body had been found, inside the hidden corridor. One of the hostages, throat cut, blood pooling into the cracks of the forgotten floor. The fragile balance shattered. Guards outside demanded immediate action. Inside, hostages screamed for mercy. And in the heart of it all, Big Smoke and Red Dog faced each other across the yard. One fighting for survival, the other for vengeance. But what nobody knew yet was that the missing hostage was only the beginning. Blood in the yard. The body in the hidden corridor changed everything. The uneasy truce between captors and captives collapsed in a heartbeat. Guards outside loaded rifles, their fingers white against the triggers. The inmates inside turned on each other, suspicions crackling like electricity in the rain-soaked yard. Big Smoke stood on a makeshift platform of overturned tables, shouting for calm, insisting that the killing was not their path to freedom. "If one hostage dies, they'll come in shooting," he roared. But his words were drowned out by Red Dog's army, a mob of men drunk on fury, demanding blood for every year they had been caged. The media painted two stories. To some, the prisoners were freedom fighters, exposing abuse buried in the bowels of Attica. To others, they were savages, holding innocent men at knife point, ready to slaughter at will. Families of hostages camped outside the gates, sobbing, begging the governor to act. Families of inmates screamed at the cameras, pleading for mercy, warning of a massacre. America was watching, and waiting for blood. Governor Rockefeller made his choice. At dawn on the fifth day, 600 state troopers and corrections officers massed outside Attica's gates, rifles, shotguns, and tear gas at the ready. Helicopters hovered low, blades chopping the storm-thickened air. Snipers took position along the towers. The order had been signed. The prison would be taken back by force. Inside, hostages prayed on their knees. Some inmates tightened their barricades, others clutched makeshift weapons with shaking hands. And in the yard, Big Smoke and Red Dog faced their final reckoning. "Stand down," Smoke warned, voice heavy with dread. Red Dog sneered, a blade glinting in his fist. "You think they're gonna spare us? You think they're gonna negotiate? This place is already a graveyard." Before Smoke could answer, the first canister of tear gas dropped from above, hissing, filling the yard with choking clouds. Screams cut through the haze. Gunfire followed, deafening cracks from the towers, bullets ripping into bodies indiscriminately. Inmates and hostages alike fell where they stood, the yard transforming into a killing field in seconds. Chaos reigned. Men clawed at the air, coughing, blinded by gas. Red Dog charged forward, swinging his blade, only to vanish in a spray of bullets. Big Smoke stumbled, dragging a hostage toward cover, shouting for surrender, but the gunfire didn't stop. The assault was merciless, a storm of lead and gas unleashed upon the trapped. When the smoke finally cleared, the yard was carpeted with bodies. 43 men lay dead, prisoners and hostages alike. Survivors knelt in the mud, hands bound, faces pressed to the ground. The uprising was over. Attica was silent again, but the silence felt like a wound. In the days that followed, officials called it a necessary action. The governor praised the troopers for their courage. But the truth bled through the cracks. Autopsies revealed hostages had been killed not by inmates, but by the bullets of their supposed rescuers. The secret corridor was sealed again, its stains hidden beneath fresh concrete. And the men who had demanded dignity were written off as monsters. Big Smoke survived, broken ribs and shattered hope, dragged into solitary where his voice would never reach the outside world again. Red Dog was gone, his body buried without a name, his rebellion drowned in blood. But the images could not be buried. Helicopters circling over a prison yard thick with smoke, the bodies of blindfolded men shot by their own rescuers, the proof of brutality hidden in Attica's walls. For the first time, America saw its prison system not as a fortress of order, but as a place where justice itself could be slaughtered. The riot at Attica became the bloodiest prison uprising in U.S. history. Yet decades later, questions still linger. Who ordered the final assault? Why were hostages killed by the very bullets meant to save them? And what truly lay hidden in those sealed corridors beneath Attica's stone walls? The official story was written in the language of control. But the whispers told something else. That not every door had been resealed. That some evidence was buried deeper, waiting for the day someone dared to uncover it again. And then came the rumor that months later, in another prison upstate, a guard was found dead in his car, his throat cut in the same way as the first hostage in the hidden corridor. The authorities called it coincidence. But inside the walls of Attica, the survivors knew better. Some ghosts, once unleashed, never go back to sleep.